What's going on, everyone? Coming up on today's show, I've got a 5-step plan. No, not to get out of rehab, but for a perfect NFL free agency plan for the Cleveland Browns. Just looking at free agency, nothing to do with draft, nothing to do with trades, just in free agency. And step one of the plan, you guessed it, it's sign Daron Payne. It's majority of teams' first step in free agency. But for the Browns, it means a little bit more because they desperately need help on the interior defensive line. You're probably a bit tired of hearing all about sign Daron Payne, but he's my top free agent target, so how could I not start it off with him? Now, we do have to really remember, Washington may franchise tag him, and that will put all this up in smoke, and I hope the Browns don't just have plan B ready, but they've also got plan C and D, because if Payne gets tagged, which I shouldn't say is likely because the Commanders are one of the most dysfunctional organizations out there, they might be stupid and not bring him back. But if they let him walk, I hope the Browns are the first team to call him. Now, he is probably going to get about $20-ish million in free agency, maybe a little bit lower. But when you come off an 11.5 sack season in a contract year, you're going to make some money out of it. If I had to project what Daron Payne's contract is, I'm thinking 5-year, $90 million. That would be an average of about $18 million a season. For reference, Chris Jones makes about $20 million. He's not going to get Chris Jones type of money. Chris Jones was the best defensive tackle in football last year, but he's coming off an 11.5 sack season when the cap goes up every year pretty much, so contracts go up every year. And I think $18 million is probably in the range of what he's going to get. Now, I also want to remind you guys that when the Browns went out and hired Jim Schwartz as their defensive coordinator, they knew what that entailed. They know that in order for Jim Schwartz to be successful, he needs to have that front wide nine, right? He needs to have good defensive tackles. And so they're not going to cheap out at this spot here and roll it back with Jordan Elliott, Perion Winfrey, and a 4th-round pick. I expect them to make a decent splash in free agency for a defensive tackle, because why would you get a defensive coordinator like Schwartz and then not give him the personnel to be successful? I really believe that between the Penn guys of Stefanski, the Ivy League guys of Stefanski and Barry, they're smarter than that. We also know that Jim Schwartz loves finding good pass rushers, and oddly enough, more often inside than outside. And Ndamukong Suh, all these players had career highs in sacks when Jim Schwartz was standing on the sideline. 10 sacks for Suh back in 2010. Marcel Darius, former first-round pick for the Bills in 2014, after Schwartz left Detroit and went to Buffalo to be their DC, he had 10 sacks. Mario Williams at the end of his career, talking about a former first overall pick, 14.5 sacks with Jim Schwartz. Fletcher Cox, 10.5 in 2018 when he was in Philly hosting the Lombardi, winning a Super Bowl with that defense. So I want everyone watching right now to chime in, be a part of the show. Is Daron Payne your top free agent target? He's mine, but I want to know from you, is he your top free agent target? The second part of my plan is a bit of a boring thing, but I think it's pretty informative and pretty educational, and that is restructuring some contracts. You've probably heard a lot of people talk about restructure these contracts. It'll make cap space. But what does that actually mean, right? Well, I found a really interesting example from USA Today back when the Rams were in cap hell a few seasons ago, and I thought it could be pretty informative. And here it is. When a restructure is done, a player converts a portion of his base salary into a signing bonus, which is then prorated over the remaining years on his contract. So if the Rams convert $18 million of Donald's base salary into a signing bonus, that $18 million will be spread out across the 4 years left on his deal, or about $4.5 million per year. It lowers his cap hit significantly in 2021, but the move also raises his cap number in 2022, 2023, and 2024 by $4.5 million. Restructuring contracts doesn't mean the problem goes away. It just means you're delaying it. But there is a positive to it, right? The 2023 biggest cap hits for the Browns are these players here. Deshaun Watson at $55.9 million. It's just not going to be that number at the end. They will restructure and kick it down the road a little bit. Same likely for Garrett at 29. Cooper, I'm not quite sure, and I'll explain why. Teller at 15, and Nick Chubb at 14. Cleveland is currently about $12 million over the cap, meaning they are in the red right now. I think they're going to get up to projected cap space of 30 to 35 million. How? Mostly by restructuring contracts. Here's the thing, though. Restructuring does not make it go away. Eventually, you got to pay the piper, right? So what you're doing here is you're kicking the can down the road, and you're delaying these contracts and delaying the paydays on them, which is okay with two things in mind. One, you plan on keeping that player long term. If you restructure a player's contract that you plan on cutting, well, then you got a whole lot of dead cap hit just the next year, and you didn't solve a whole lot. But if you plan on holding on to them, and you view them as someone that no way in heck you're cutting, well, then it's no big deal because the cap goes up every year. And so what might be a 25% cap hit on your books in 2023, well, you spread that money out over the next 4 years of that contract, and it's going to water down because the cap's going to keep going up. There's more money to spend, and all of a sudden, what looked to be a huge hit on your books for just 2023 will spread out over the next couple of years. If you don't have a plan to cut them, it's kind of water it down, and then with the cap going up, it's not that big of a burden for your team there. So it's not a foolproof plan. It's kicking the can down the road a little bit. People got to remember, restructuring the contracts does not just simply mean we're just making the problem disappear. You're just making the problem be next year, but it might not be as big as a problem then next year if other contracts for other highly paid players are off your books, and all of a sudden you can afford to pay Watson all that much more money because you're not paying someone like Teller or Chubb in this instance in 2025. Now, before we get to my other 3 steps in this 5-step perfect plan, my boss here at Chat Sports, James Yoder, is a big Michigan guy. You can check out his YouTube channel, The Michigan Football Report, and he loves to make these subtle jabs at me, Browns fans, for being Buckeyes fans, and he said there's no way Browns fans can come together and get 25 subs and out-sub his Michigan football channel. So if you are a Buckeye fan watching right now and you hate the team up north, subscribe. And if you're not an Ohio State fan, but you got a boss sometimes that can, ride you a little bit, well, I feel your pain. So subscribe and get the best Browns YouTube coverage. My third prong is signing Mecole Hardman, the Kansas City Chiefs speedy wide receiver. I think would fit perfectly in this Browns offense. Now, when we look at what Mecole Hardman has done the last 4 years, in 2022, he battled some injuries. He didn't play in the Super Bowl. He was on IR. But in 2021, nearly 700 yards and 2 touchdowns. Sure, he's got Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes also likes to look to Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce back then. So for Hardman to put up 3 straight 500-plus yard seasons as the third option, or sometimes even the fourth option, I like that. Now imagine this depth chart here, with Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones as your top 2 targets, and Mecole Hardman working out of the slot. David Bell is going to be on this team next year. I think Michael Woods will as well, in addition to some rookie or free agent they pick up along the way. But why Mecole Hardman? Why not some other wide receiver? Because speed is crucial. If you don't have a speedy wide receiver, well, defenses by week 2 or week 3 are going to know they don't have anyone that can take the top off the defense. What does that mean? What does that football cliche mean? Basically, if you've got a whole bunch of players that can't separate all that well and are more possession receivers, the safeties are going to drop down more. You're not going to get such, respected man-to-man coverage. You're going to get a lot of zones. It's going to be hard to separate and whatnot. But if you bring Mecole Hardman on the field, well, they know, hey, we got to take a step back because he can burn us and get past us. And so we have to respect the deep threat abilities. And sure, you can just say, well, why not have Anthony Schwartz then? Well, because no one respects Anthony Schwartz. But Mecole Hardman, they do. Now, before we get to my other steps of my perfect free agency plan, there is a great shirt right now at Fanatics that's on sale. Might not last forever, though, so jump on it now. It's a retro shirt. I'm a big fan of it. Chatsports.com/CLE shirt. I've got that link for everyone in the comments and the description of today's show. It's an awesome shirt if you ask me. It's going to start warming up soon. So rock your Brownies gear in style with this dope shirt. Links in the comments and the description of today's show. Fourth step of my plan is bring back Anthony Walker. I know this might not be the sexiest looking plan here, but I think if this happens, it'd be a damn good free agency. Now, I've tossed and turned about, they've only got 3 linebackers on their roster for 2023. JOK, Tony Fields, and Jacob Phillips. They're going to add more bodies there. Is it going to be Walker and or Taki? Both guys are free agents. I think it's ultimately going to be Anthony Walker for a couple of reasons. One, this defense fell off when Walker went down in week 3 against Pittsburgh. It was obvious that he was much more than just a green dot, right? He was a leader. He was a heart and soul of this defense, and they sorely missed him. I think the coaching staff recognized that and would be wise to bring him back. They also know he's coming off 2 straight years of injuries, so that's kind of good and bad. The good being you can probably get him for cheap, and it sounds like he wants to stay with the Browns. So give him an incentive-heavy contract and bring him back, right? The downside is he's had 2 straight years with injuries plaguing him. Do you want to run it for a 3rd straight year? I think Walker, though, would be a very strong piece to bring back to find a leader of the middle of this defense that games like the Falcons and the Chargers, when they were just getting blown over, they needed an Anthony Walker. My 5th and final element of a perfect free agency plan is this. Release John Johnson. It's a little bit mean, but ultimately I think it's what's best for the Browns, and that's why I'm saying it. Now, if the Browns move on from Johnson after June 1st, his cap hit is $3.7 million in 2023. That's money you're paying him not to be on your team. You can spread it over 2 years when you release someone after June 1st, so $8.8 million in 2024. But nearly $10 million of cap savings in 2023. When you're 12-ish million in the red right now, that, paired with some restructures like we talked about, gets you closer to $30 million. And the Browns, they have to get to that point. And Johnson, unfortunately, is just a casualty of this. His stats as a Cleveland Brown, 162 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 9 pass breakups, 4 interceptions. He was a lot better in his first year by the lake. This past season, man, for someone I thought, or maybe still I think, is a real leader of this locker room, I saw one too many clips, one too many moments or instances of him just at the goal line, not going 100% to stop a running back to get in the end zone. Just kind of let him as a matador. Entrez-vous. Into the end zone you go. So with that, here is my 5-step plan for a perfect free agency plan. Sign Daron Payne. Short and sweet. They don't have a ton of money to spend on multiple top guys. But they can get $20 million for Daron Payne. Restructure some contracts to make number 1 possible. Sign Mecole Hardman. Probably going to cost you, I don't know, like 3 years. $25 million. He's not going to get all that much money. It's a bad free agency class for wide receivers. Maybe you get a kind of a bit of an overpay, but I still am interested in Hardman. Bring back Anthony Walker to bring back some leadership to this defense that was sorely missed for most of 2022. And release John Johnson to mostly make all that possible to free up some money. So get your red pen out. Grade my free agency plan for the Browns. I want to know what you have to say about it. A, B, C, D, or F. I'm going to give myself an A-. Stay hungry, but I like it. I do like my plan. I'm going to give myself an A-. All right, here we go. Random Browns time. We can get the name at the bottom, I think, Patrick. But we got an Ohio legend, okay? And that is Chris Spielman. If you don't quite know his background or story, he was a former pick for the Detroit Lions, played some good football there, then went to the Bills, signed with the Browns in 1999, their first year back, ultimately retired before he ever played a snap for the Browns in the regular season. But he's an Ohio legend. He's an Ohio State Buckeye legend. And Keith Niergardner submitted him as a random Browns player. And I saw that name, and I was like, now that is a great random Browns player that I don't even know if counts because he never really played for the Browns, but he was there for the preseason. So, cha-ching, baby. All right, that's going to do it for us on today's show. Appreciate everyone for tuning in and making us a part of your day. We'll see you guys later, all off season long, with more Browns news and rumors.